Hello my dear friends, and welcome back to another Star Wars video. So I can already tell this is going to be the big topic of the weekend. This one is pretty darn insane. We've been waiting a long time for this update. Leslye Headland has finally opened up about the entire situation that went down with the Acolyte, the controversy surrounding it, the cancellation, and she even talks about Star Wars YouTubers. So as you can imagine, I just had to know what she had to say, and we have a lot to break down. Now I know this might be something of a hot take, because in today's climate it's always got to be very dramatic, it's always about the big slams, the big takedowns, ripping apart what someone says, and very few people care about nuance. But I must say, while I do have my disagreements with Leslye, and even disagree with things she says in this very interview, to her credit, she doesn't beat around the bush. Even if I and others don't like some of her responses, at least she's not doing that thing that many creatives do, when they hand wave away questions with big fake PR smiles and give generic answers. And like I say, I might be one of the first, but there are going to be so many videos made about this. But today, I'm giving you my take. So to cut right to the chase, Leslye sat down with the Wrap to discuss life post-Acolyte, her creative ventures, and her reflections on everything that went down with the show. And usually with these kinds of post-mortems, you're lucky if you get a soundbite, but Leslye went into a lot of depth. And I've already seen some quotes from this interview making the rounds, but they're without the full context. I'm not going to drag this out, I am just going to get to the meat and potatoes, but I'm also not going to misrepresent what's being said. I'm going to give you the full shebang and present it as it was asked. So, she begins by addressing what I think we can all agree is the elephant in the room, the cancellation of the Acolyte and the fan response to it. Now I have to be honest, based on reactions from other cast members, notably the one from her wife, I wasn't expecting Leslye to give such a diplomatic and level-headed response, let alone be an Andor fan, as you're going to see in just a moment. She said the Acolyte was always going to be a major risk, it was a new part of the timeline, and you didn't have the reference of the politics and the war that Tony Gilroy brilliantly exploited in a genius way in Andor. So there you go. And then she says, I also think that any gripes creatively with the show are completely valid. That's people's reactions. The show was always a risk. It's the old adage of the first one through the wall is the bloodiest. Now a couple of things to break down. She says any gripes creatively are valid. She's right, but a lot of Acolyte fans didn't get the memo. I personally didn't really like the show. There were certain characters I liked, certain themes they explored which I enjoyed, but overall it wasn't my cup of tea. It was a series with so many missed opportunities, and I've always critiqued it from that perspective. Go back to any of my breakdowns, I engage with the show in universe. But many fans like myself, who didn't like it for creative reasons, were branded as toxic. So at least it's being acknowledged that you can criticize media, and it doesn't inherently mean you're in this group or that group, that you're labeled and branded, and that you're just immediately put in a box. So often in fandom we talk about toxic negativity, but simultaneously toxic positivity is very much a real thing, and it has become a problem. These echo chambers where you can't say anything negative without being kicked out the group, so to speak. And even stuff that you like, you should view with a critical lens. I think it's healthy, I think it's good for discourse, and it's also good for media literacy. Because even things I love, I can admit, have their flaws. I don't think anything is, fully perfect. And so now we come on to the meat and potatoes. This is the bit where Leslye addresses Star Wars YouTubers, and so instantly my ears perked up, and she says, while she wasn't online during the run of the Acolyte, she is a Star Wars fan. And being a Star Wars fan, she says, quote, she has been since the launch of YouTube, part of the Star Wars recap, criticism, lionization fandom community. These guys I've known for years and years. So when I got the information from others what the weather report was, there was real concern from friends and co-workers that saddened me. And this bit's pretty insane. She says, I also was like, I know who these guys are. You don't have to tell me who's talking about it or how bad it is online. I know exactly who they are. I supported them on Patreon, she says. That's pretty wild, I'll come back to this in just a moment. She carries on, there are some of them that I respect, there are some of them that I think are absolutely snake oil salesmen, just opportunists. Then of course, there are the fascists and racists. So it runs a gamut. It isn't just one thing or the other. So I don't know why it surprises me. Maybe it's because it's what I do for a living. But Leslye Headland is a Star Wars YouTube fan. Do you think she was sat there watching episode breakdowns of The Mandalorian? I don't know why that boggles my mind. And not only did she watch Star Wars YouTube, she contributed to YouTubers' Patreons. I run a Patreon, and the first thing I did was look her up. But no, she was never a fan of mine, or at least she wasn't a patron. If I were to guess, I'd assume she was a patron of those Star Wars YouTubers who were given special access. The ones who got to meet her and Dave Filoni and went to the Acolyte premiere. Probably the ones who were big fans of the show, I'm guessing. And look, I'm friends with a lot of Star Wars YouTubers, ones who have more positive voices than I do, ones who have more negative voices than I do. And yes, there are definitely some people out there who you could consider, opportunists, those who didn't really care about the brand. But I found that there are lots of influencers out there, ones who might dunk on Disney Star Wars, who once absolutely loved the franchise, and so their position comes from a place of frustration. Not all of them, obviously, but more than you might think. And once upon a time, those same fans were ones who celebrated Star Wars. And let me just clarify, I'm not talking about those who come from a place of bad faith, who exhibit horribleness and nastiness, really personal attacks. I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about well-intentioned fans who love Star Wars, but just don't resonate with some of the recent shows and films. But Leslye says that she wasn't above being disappointed, especially when the show was cancelled by Disney. She says, quote, "I wasn't surprised, but in other ways, I was disappointed. It's just that Star Wars is on a massive level of visibility." And then, in a surprising statement, and this is one I disagree with her about, she thinks Star Wars content creation is more culturally impactful in the 21st century than actual Star Wars itself. She said she realized how big Star Wars social media was, and how content being made about shows and movies are sometimes more impactful than the actual product. And look, on the one hand, I see where she's coming from, because in the streaming age, some shows, some films are so bad that the memes made about them become more relevant than the actual art. But in terms of Star Wars, memes and reactions to The Acolyte, maybe, but the entire Star Wars franchise, I disagree. The Skywalker saga is way more impactful than any internet content made about it. And she finishes with her reaction to the cancellation itself. She says, quote, "I was surprised at the swiftness and the publicness of it. I was surprised by the way it was handled, but once I was getting particular phone calls about the reaction and criticism and the viewership, I felt like, okay, the writing's on the wall for sure." And in terms of a second season, she confirms the original plans for season 2 involved Chimera, but ultimately she says she has no regrets. A lot to take in this interview, my friends. A lot of very interesting and I guess controversial comments. I want to know what you guys think. Share your thoughts in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this one, please be sure to give me a big fat thumbs up, subscribe if you're new, and may the Force be with you always.